Have you ever wondered how much pain and physical exhaustion someone can go through without giving up? Well, this biography, Unbroken, by Laura Hillingberg, is a great example of a man named Luis Zamperini. Luis grew up in California and was a terrible student, terrible person in general. He smoked his first cigarette at the age of 5 and was dropping out of classes until his father and brother realized that he was a great runner and tried out for the high school track team. He ended up being so phenomenal that he broke the world record for high schoolers in the mile run. And he was so dedicated to running that he turned his life around and was a great person in general. So, he was so phenomenal that at the age of 19 he went to Berlin, Germany for the Olympics, right before the Nazi era, or as the Nazi era was starting up. And he got 8th in his event, but regardless, a 19-year-old in the Olympics is insane. Anyway, he came back home, and instead of preparing for the next Olympics, there was World War II occurring. So instead, he was involved in the Air Force. And one day, he went on a flight with 12 of his crewmates on a rescue mission. However, they never found the plane that was supposedly down, and they themselves crashed, only leaving him, another survivor, and the pilot alive out of the 12 people. They ended up staying on the raft for about over a month. On the 33rd day, the person that wasn't the pilot or Luis himself gave up and realized that he was going to die and ultimately jumped off the raft, committing suicide by drowning. Anyway, about a week later, they find an island which is occupied by Japanese people, and they take them and they create prisoners of war out of them. And the real life situation that Luis goes through is his experiences at this prisoner of war camp and how horrible things he has to go through. Anyway, by the end of the book, Americans win the war, he's returned home, and he ultimately ends up forgiving these sergeants that that pretty much put him through hell and back. And that's a big thing in the book. Anyway, I think this book is a great book for World War II junkies, anyone who likes history. I'm going to read a quote from the book because this was horrible events that Luis had to go through, and it's really pushing him to the extreme of physical pain, beatings, and just terrible, terrible things that they went through during World War II. And here's a good quote from the book about it. "Why you no look me in eye?" the corporal shouted. The other men in line went rigid. Luis steadied himself. He held his face taut as he raised his eyes to the corporal's face. Again came the whirling arm, the jarring blow into his skull, his stumbling legs trying to hold him upright. "You no look at me." The man, thought Tinker, is a psychopath. So they literally were beaten every day by these German sergeants. And the German sergeant that beat Louis over and over again, he beat everyone, but he especially liked Louis because he wouldn't give up, was named the Bird by these Americans in the prisoner of war camp. Anyway, my takeaway from the book is regardless of how much pain you're going through, you can always make it through. And a second takeaway I had from the book was that forgiveness is incredible because when Louis got back from the prisoner of war camp, he was becoming a drunk, and he had nightmares every night of, quote unquote, the Bird was the sergeant's name that tortured him day after day. But once he was able to forgive them, it turned his life around, and he was able to live a much higher quality life. And I think that's all I have to say. What I liked about the book, I liked how the author was able to describe how bad it was. Like, you could understand from the author's words how terrible these actions were. And granted, it probably doesn't take much to explain how terrible this was, but the author did a great job in portraying these horrific events. Anyway, all right, thanks for listening.